Good evening, colleagues. My name is Anatoly Oleksienko. I'm professor at the Education University of Hong Kong. And we are back to our global webinars. And tonight, we have this webinar dedicated to our two colleagues in Ukraine who passed away during the previous 12 months, and we lost many more colleagues, but this one is dedicated to our researchers in higher education in Ukraine. In particular, we celebrate the life of Professor Serhiy Kurbatov and Svitlana Shchudlo. Both of them were unfortunately passed away in young age, and the war as such has been catastrophic condition in which these people had to live and being unable to receive proper support, healthcare support, and suffering from excessive stress and everything else. So tonight we are doing this collaborative work with the Consortium of higher education researchers in Europe, and Dr. Hugo Horta, who is with us tonight, might want to say several words a little bit later about the consortium and the work that Europeans have been doing in supporting the Ukrainians and Ukrainian scholars in particular. So, tonight we are focusing on a very difficult subject, which is the future of Ukraine's higher education. Obviously, it's an exceptionally difficult topic to speak about at the time when Ukraine faces existential crisis. Right? We don't know what happens to Ukraine in the coming months and years. Ukrainians believe in victory. They have hope despite all odds, as we are saying in this newest article which will be coming out in teaching in higher education. But in this darkest time and the most difficult time in Ukraine's history, we will be looking into the major questions that exist for Ukrainian scholars. Can Ukraine become a harbinger of new transformations in global higher education based on what's happening in Ukraine? Can Ukraine become a major source of some important knowledge that others can learn from the country? And what it really mean? What does it really mean to exist in the crisis where faculty members and students disappear, die, perish in the battle for their dignity, for the existence of their nation, for their own identity? What does it really mean to teach and learn? What does it really mean to do research? What kind of research agendas most significant at this point in time? And how do researchers, teachers in other countries contribute to rethinking this particular agenda in terms of how do they become participants or contributors to solving the problems of our kind of security, the security deficit that exists in Ukraine, but the security deficit which increasingly grows worldwide, right? So we know that this becomes a serious problem, not only for Ukraine, but also for the neighboring countries, but also for the countries which are far away from Ukraine. So the world is in this kind of constant or increasing anxiety about what's next. what's next for humanity in general, and what's next for the jobs as we know them, the systems as we know them, and higher education as we used to develop and practice. So tonight I have several scholars from Ukraine. I can see Dr. Yevhen Nikolaev from Kyiv. Yevhen wrote a good number of reports for international community. He collaborates with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Ukraine and has published a number of reports on the situation in the embattled higher education system of Ukraine. Also, I have Liz Shchepetilnikova, who is a PhD scholar and has been doing a lot of research on intellectual leadership, but also on the challenges of internationalization in the post-Soviet higher education. So we have a number of scholars who can share with us their insights from the field, from the research on Ukraine. Meanwhile, please feel free to ask questions, make comments in the chat. I'll be happy to invite you to speak after we hear presentations from Yevhen and Liz. So please engage with us, ask any questions you may want to ask. And Yevhen and Liz, let's start probably with some kind of those kind of difficult questions. What did you find in your research, and how would you define what is really critical for further development for the future of Ukrainian higher education? Who would like to speak first? Yevhen, Liz? Liz? Yevhen, okay.
Okay. Hello, thank you for inviting me to this event, to this webinar. I think what we understand now from over 1.5 years of war, from seeing what is happening in the universities of Ukraine, the key factor, the key point is human capital. Too many people had to move from their homes, from the cities where the universities are, either to safer regions of Ukraine or to abroad. This is something which is fair to say, both about the students and about the professors, the faculty. For example, now is we in Ukraine from September the 1st have the new school year, or the new university year, how do you call it? And as far as I see, every department at many universities has some vacancies, because some of the teachers left their jobs because they cannot continue working while staying abroad, staying in many European countries mostly. And the universities are taking, at last, finally, after COVID-19 and the war, are taking the students back to physical auditoriums, to physical rooms, in order to communicate with them live and to conduct studies more efficiently. And some students and some faculty are physically absent, they are far away, and they cannot continue working this way. So this is the one thing I think which is a key challenge for Ukrainian universities right now.
Okay. Liz, how do you see the problem? What is the most challenging question that Ukrainians face today?
Thank you, Anatoly. Yes, and thank you, Yevhen, very much for your remarks. I think that there are two important factors to consider here, which will kind of further our conversation, following what you and Yevhen have mentioned before. First, of course, it's an important disclosure on my end. I come from the predisposition that was well articulated by Professor Serhiy that the one outcome of this war that we know for sure is that Ukraine secured its existence, right? So when I'm thinking about my analysis and when I'm talking today, this is the very basic assumption that I'm coming from. And when we're coming from that assumption, one of the increasing challenges that I see, both emerging from my studies and communication with colleagues back in Ukraine, is that the challenges that are faced by Ukraine's higher education and society more broadly are so unique that solutions to those challenges are often not in Ukraine or non-existent at all. And this is a significant concern because as scholars of Ukraine well know, we have been struggling in the post-Soviet period of our independence to really engage internationally in a critical manner, in a way that would allow us both to contribute with our experience, but also to engage global community in helping us leverage that human capital, as Yevhen put it, right? Leverage that talent that can help us to address our own concerns. So from that perspective, of course, the relationships that Ukrainian displaced scholars and students are now building, along with the universities that are extending their international partnerships, are going to be critical. But I think, when we think about acknowledging the uniqueness of Ukraine's situation and the challenges that come along with us, we'd also have to acknowledge that the significant challenge is going to be in transforming Ukrainian institutions, particularly institutions of higher education, in order to be capable of meeting that challenge. I'll leave it at that, and then we can probably extend on those points. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so in general, let us say there is a problem with human capital on the one hand. And human capital, you mean that people have left, or faculty members have left, although you can argue that some of them were accommodated in very good universities in the West, right? And they will receive better knowledge about how to organize and manage research, teaching programs, how to connect with their partners in these Western universities. So I'd say they are developing strategic partnerships in to a large extent. So the human capital that is not necessarily lost entirely, but it's as far as I understand, this is a change of how the human capital is placed, and how this placement of the human capital contributes to the institutions about which Liz was talking about, right? However, I remember, I guess it's one of the presentations, of previous presentations, which we had for the same reason in memoriam of our two colleagues in Ukrainian language. I think we were speaking about the problem of these institutions, right? So in a way, these institutions, as we know, are the legacy of the Soviet system of organization, which is very problematic system of organization. It's very often a feudal type of organization, and very anti-Western type of organization, which is jealous, resentful of competitive powers, somebody else's success, which goes beyond this success of a supreme leader, let us say, in this kind of language of the Soviet times. And in a way, that particular institution is a really huge problem. So should we really be concerned about human capital becoming separated from that kind of Soviet legacy, the institutional legacy? So how would you interpret that particular relationship or tension maybe between the human capital, or I would probably even argue human agency as such, this kind of transformative agency, right? And the institutional agency, which is not necessarily the agency of change. I mean, this is often, or was very often remarked as being the agency of re-Sovietization maybe, or delays with the reforms and many other issues. Yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you, Anatoly, for this very complex question. I would not wish to say that all our higher education institutions are post-Soviet type, or they all have a heavy feudal burden, if you call it, or feudal style management. There are different universities, and they are at different stages of making changes, right? So some of them are deeply stuck in the post-Soviet, this supreme leadership model. Others are moving away from it, or have moved away from it so successfully. So I have the experience of working in two universities, right? And one of them is right now, and has been for many years, a sample of this near supreme leadership model, but this about Kiev universities. In Kiev, you cannot make it a totally feudal thing, because people have many other things, the opportunities to do in Kiev. And the other university at which I'm working right now is much more democratic. What I have faced this year in this other university, which I represent, this Grinchenko University, however, is that although the top management has consistently pushed towards democratization and other good things, and this push has been going on for many years. But I was taking part in preparing the midterm strategy for our university until 2027. And what was very clear was that many faculties, many departments, not all of them, but most of them have demonstrated a very heavy lack of initiative. They do not want to change. They do not want to think about the future beyond their teaching. They do not want to implement some risky, innovative projects. That's the problem. Even in a more democratic kind of institution, which is what I have experienced.
Liz, I can see other colleagues, maybe Ludmila.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I think that you are certainly right. I think Mikhailo Vernitsky, who is currently Deputy Minister for Higher Education, has put it very accurately. We have to be aware that what we have in Ukraine is not a system of higher education. It's a set of atomized institutions of higher education. And we have to be very well aware that the inequality among those institutions is growing and will continue to be to grow as a result of this war, right? Because obviously we have, institutions that have been displaced back in 2014. Now some of them have been double displaced for the second time. This has played out very negatively for those institutions. But more broadly, when we're talking about the Ukrainian higher education institutions, there is this very visible phenomenon that Yevhen has hinted at. There are those who are survivalists, those who are trying to resist change at any cost, and those who are trying to reproduce the post-Soviet culture of mediocrity and paternalism. And there are those, of course, institutions that are trying to break free out of that system, out of that cultural pattern, if we may say, because again, right, we could also use the assumption that Mikhailo suggested that this is not really a system. It doesn't function as a system. So when we're talking about those two very polarly, like they're very different poles, very different types of institutions, they do play a significant role in the way how human agency, individual agency of scholars and students then plays out within those two very diverse contexts and everything in between, right? Because one of the issues that comes across in my studies consistently is that there is a value-driven divide within the academia. The academia itself on the individual level has a rather small but very motivated, engaged, and agentile part of it, who and these people are committed to re-envisioning their values. They're committed to the values of academic integrity, academic excellence, critical thinking, et cetera, and of course there is a very large part of Ukrainian academia that wants to continue surviving in the context of uniformity, when the ministry or the university administrators tell them everything that they need to do, print out exact instructions, which of course then perpetrates dogmatism and paternalism. And one of the phenomena that we're seeing right now is, of course, the fact that unfortunately that post-Soviet culture or Soviet legacy of that culture has also been transmitted across the generations, right? This is no longer a generational issue from my perspective, at least. This is because in both sides and both kind of types of academic communities, those who are promoting change and those who are resisting change, we see both academics that have come into the profession during the Soviet period, as well as those who socialized in the academic profession after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I think that those, when we think about those different types of institutions, coming back to the very first question and comments provided by Yevhen, those two very different types of institutions are going to have very different experience with addressing the challenge of talent attraction, with addressing the challenge of reconceptualizing their purpose in the society that has been torn apart by the war. And that is likely, of course, to contribute to the growing divide between the institutions that are attempting to survive in the post-Soviet mode and those institutions that are taking up the initiative to innovate and to reach out to the world.
Thank you. Colleagues, feel free to raise your hand, use reactions if you have comment or question. Please get engaged with us in our conversation. Meanwhile, let me just kind of use this typology of survivalists and reproducers and innovators, probably, if I can call them as such. And all of them have their own certain agency of some kind, right? You can argue this is freedom of choice in terms of what they think they should be doing at the time of in the times of crisis. So and if you interview some of these people, some of these reproducers simply would argue that they have to teach the curriculum which was designed years ago, approved years ago, and they have to continue with the workload, with the responsibility which was assigned to them by the university or was assigned to them by department heads and everything else, right? So these reproducers have their own kind of agency of serving the institution, the country as they understand it, right? Where innovators might be looking more into questions of change and in terms of dissatisfaction or the problem of that particular service which reproducers tend to implement, to pursue, right? So it's kind of like a clash between the two groups in some way, I would argue. Where survivalists are probably, I'm not sure what would that really mean for survivalists, would probably handle a number of concerns regarding their families, in terms of how secure these families are amidst the shelling and constant air raids, and this looks like there is no end to that, right? To that type of concern about survival, and as well as survivalists in terms of, I think, survivalists in terms of keeping jobs, trying to secure employment and get some basic income, right? Just to be able to cope with the economy, with the household needs and so on. So, okay, given these kind of differences in agencies, let's kind of look into next steps, like in terms of what should be done. What are the needs that that higher education institutions should be addressing immediately, in terms of what you've been studying, in terms of what you heard from the faculty members, important decision makers. So what do you see as these kind of steps that need to be made in the nearest future? Ivan?
I'm pretty much biased in addressing this question because I am I'm currently working with the Department of Higher Education, with the Ministry of Higher Education. So the key ideas that are there that belong to the ministry are currently in my head. So I'm biased towards the ideas that are right now proposed by people, including the above mentioned by Liz Mikhailo-Vinitsky and others. Yes. But saying that I am biased, what currently is discussed is changing the financial procedures for higher education. What is not currently discussed, but will be a topic much later after we win the war, is finding resources and rebuilding the ruined university buildings. That's an issue. Another issue, a very interesting challenge, is making the academic community of Ukrainian universities much more English speaking than it is now. That's a very difficult question, which We don't yet know how to address and solve correctly, so it is an exception, not a rule, that the Ukrainian professors and students speak and know English well. So, as I said, human capital is an issue. You are saying very correctly, Anatoly, that those academics who are now in other countries, in good universities, they are a potential bridge between us and new partnerships with the colleagues in other countries. That's, in theory, that's a very good point. In practice, I doubt that many of these people will be serving the role of a bridge with the Ukrainian institutions, you see, if you understand me correctly. So they will be integrating into European universities, right? And then far from everyone will be keeping in touch with the universities here in Kiev or in Donbass, or relocated universities, or in Lviv, whatsoever. I'm just naming some regions of Ukraine. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. But I'm very biased. I do understand that nobody raises the question, as Liz said. Okay, Mikhailo Vinitsky says it's not a system of higher education, it's separate universities. Okay, nobody is going to do anything about it, you know. So absolutely no. There is one initiative to create an alliance of Ukrainian universities between 5 of them, and we have over 300. So, and that's it. And there is nothing else right now going on this level. So I don't know. Hard to say. Hard question, no good answer.
Okay. Liz, you have a comment?
Yeah, sure. Just to follow up really on what Johan has been saying, you know, the ministerial priorities are obviously there, and they're being discussed, and there is the whole strategy for educational system that is being revised and discussed, and from what I understand has received thousands and thousands of proposals. I think that I agree with Johan that the challenge really is that many of the policy priorities are very technocratic, if I may say, in their sense. Right, so there's a lot of hope that, you know, the new funding system is gonna fix the fundamental issues. We're gonna put the right incentives into the system, and that's gonna help the faculty to learn English or become more internationally engaged or teach better, higher quality courses. I think the concern is exactly the fact that there is no significant discussion going on about the purpose of higher education in the war-torn society and in the post-war recovery. And this is a conversation that, as Johan rightfully mentioned, is happening between some of the universities, particularly those that have formed the alliance of the Ukrainian universities, where the institutions themselves, but again, that very small portion of the institutions that are taking on the innovation challenge are trying to understand what is their purpose in this consistently changing society that is increasingly traumatized, increasingly suffering from the consequences of the war and the ongoing destructions that Russia is waging against Ukraine. So the very first question, I think the very basic question, is really understanding the purpose of this system, because then you can design a system and a policies based on those that understanding. The second aspect that Johan has also mentioned is this key challenge of not just retaining the talent, but returning the talent or attracting the talent that is that has been socialized elsewhere, right? And this is not necessarily also very well discussed in Ukraine, but there are scholars, both of Ukrainian origin and other origins abroad, who are convinced that Ukraine would need a strategy, not just to attract Ukrainian talent, but to attract talent from Asia and Africa and whatnot. And when we think about that particular challenge, what we have seen throughout the war is, again, that the institutions and administrators in particularly who cherish their post-Soviet legacy are attempting to continually reproduce very rigid system of higher education. And that also means that some of the institutions have absolutely consciously and intentionally broke away their ties with their faculty who have been displaced abroad. And they've used governmental regulations as an excuse for it in a very paternalistic style that some of them continue to exercise. So I think another priority, which has to be crucial for the institutions and the government more broadly, is limiting the restrictions on agile engagement of higher education actors. And that means limiting restrictions on scholars and students, limiting restrictions that are out there on teaching and on research, because the reality, is that this war has, pushed us to recognize that the discourse of preventing some kind of major misconduct through strict government regulations or through strict institutional regulations has done nothing more but contribute to reproducing the culture of mediocrity. I think I'll leave it at that.
Great. So I can see that Oksana Zabolotna joined us, and she was a close friend of Svitlana Shchudlo, and both of them established the Ukrainian Education Research Association. And I think Oksana wanted to say a word, right? And then I see Florian, I can see your hand risen, and also Hugo Horta is also online, so we will ask them just to also speak or ask questions briefly. Okay, Oksana.
Yeah, well, this is a kind of a meeting in memory of Svitlana Shchudlo. So I want to mention that this is the exact day when she passed away, so a year ago. So it's exactly a year, so it would be quite right to just say a few words about her real child, about Ukrainian Educational Research Association. As so she really considered it a very important thing in her life. So, and how much time do I have?
We agreed on five minutes, but yeah, you can just you want to share with us slides, right? So please.
Yeah, I will try and do it quite quickly, and also this presentation focuses on what non-governmental organizations do to support academics in Ukraine, because our strength is in unity, and this way we can help each other to cope with trauma. And I'm going to give the example of the Ukrainian Educational Research Association and just a few words about its history and what we did after the 24th of February and what we did in terms of global education and educational research during the full-scale war. Is it possible, and how can we support people in doing it, and some other kinds of support to UCHER members. So the association was founded by Svitlana Shchudlo. She was the first president of the association, and on the 1st of December in 2015. So we are 8-year-old now, actually. Now we have about 400 members from all regions of Ukraine. And our main mission is to support educational research and educational researchers. Actually, this is Svitlana, and those who do not know her, just to understand.
We cannot see the slides. The slides are not moving, Oksana, so if you can just kind of...
Oh, I can't understand why. I'll try again. So those who do not know Svitlana might know that she was very ill and she could not move at all, and her only contact with the world was her eyes when she could type on her device, and that was all. And that way she managed to do educational research, to work as a university professor. She just wrote everything to her students, and the students conducted classes, and she gave feedback by typing with her eyes. This is how strong this person was. So can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Yeah, and I am changing the slide. Yeah, and the strength of the association is that it unites people from different research fields. And actually, I want to mention Serhiy Kurbatov as the council member of the association. So he was the philosopher, and he really contributed with his philosophic ideas and his deep vision of any process. And he has been really very, very active in the work of the association, and we cannot believe that he's not with us now. And our original mission was study, research, and serve in society. And we conducted a lot of conferences, annual conferences, seasonal schools, and had different projects which dealt with education and research. But then after the war started, we changed a little bit of what we did, and our mission had the priority of telling the truth to the world about the situation in Ukraine. Then we were to support the UCHER members, because you know that when a person is traumatized, the person is not thinking about research or work, so the person is living in the trauma. That's why for us to support UCHER members was the priority thing, and actually study and research really remained. So we have spoken at different events. Some of you were present and asked questions. Thank you for the concern. Thank you for the interest in what is going on in Ukraine. That is really important to us. And we also took part in the European Congress of Global Education, and were present in signing the Declaration on Global Education. And there was one point raised there that global education is about education for democracy, for peace and justice, and sustainable development. And what we spoke about there was that you cannot speak about sustainable development and reaching goals of sustainable development if goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, does not become number one. Because if there is war, there is poverty, there is hunger, there is, and no other goals can be attained without it. So this is goal number one, and this is how we see it, and this is how we can, what we can do to support the members of the association. So we got some support from European Educational Research Association, and we opened the call, and we decided that the best way to improve and to do something for Ukrainian education was to ask people who are in it of what should be done. That's why we asked our members, and they submitted the projects, and there were 10 projects that won, and the people representing the project teams were from 11 regions, and 3 regions were badly damaged. We have people from Melitopol, from Kherson, and the people have a clear vision of what to do to improve Ukrainian education, and they have a vision of how to disseminate information about the project results. All the information about the project is on the UCHER website. They are really they have really different focuses, but they deal with real problems in Ukrainian education. And we had already interim report with the president of European Educational Research Association present in that. And the final thing that we did was that we conducted the UCHER Summer School of Resilience for 36 association members, where we got together, and the best way to do it was to support each other. So, and this is what we managed to do, I think. So, and we saw that different universities have the same problems, and really a lot of things should be reorganized. And this is not a system of education, I agree with it. So this is a number of different institutions that do something to survive, but to start the change, we should have a clear vision, we should know where to move, and we should go out, get out of the trauma we are all experiencing now. So thank you very much. Thank you for the attention, and I'm open to the questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Oksana. Yeah, it's amazing that what these institutions that emerged during the war, which started in 2014, right? The association came to life in 2015, and then it continues to bring people together to inspire them for professional development, for innovation, and communicating the truth, as you said, to the world, right? Just engaging with the researchers elsewhere. And so, and it's pretty much we talk about the agency in terms of a determination, ability to connect, create, and promote the freedom of research and teaching and learning. We think about these institutions as multiple actors in various forms, not necessarily kind of campuses and universities, but the association as such provides an interesting kind of example of how human agency still drives the whole idea of how to implement ideas through a variety of instruments, projects, institutional projects in particular. And so it's a great example. Thank you. Florian, you had, I saw your, Florian Rubik is currently educational consultant developer at Utrecht University, and he's a former PhD student at Hong Kong U. So, and he's now trying to help Ukrainian scholars to develop projects, new projects, which would connect them with the European space of higher education. Florian.
Thank you, Anatoly. It took me a long time to find a job because I didn't realize the kind of job that I now have existed until quite late. But there's a sort of in-house consultancy at Utrecht University where a large group of people with PhDs provide in-house consultancy to professors, ranging from small class activities to redesigning entire bachelor or master degrees. We do all kinds of things. And I found this expertise and the practical experience very interesting. Many programs elsewhere in the Netherlands have copied part of what Utrecht does. And even some of the national programs that the government now used is modeled on some of the practices of Utrecht University. So I spotted an opportunity thinking, maybe we can do something with this. Maybe we can try to find a group of people who want to work on educational innovation in Ukraine, who want to think about professional development in Ukraine. And I heard you talk about the diversity of institutional cultures and attitudes and risk aversion. And I was wondering from that perspective, from the speakers, what kind of challenges do you think I would face in trying to set up something like this?
Yeah, great question. Okay. Anyone? Liz, Ivana, Oksana?
I think I can just start by saying thank you so much for initiated this conversation. I have heard a little bit about this previously from Anatoly, and I have shared your information with the Alliance of the Ukrainian Universities that we have mentioned earlier here, who seem to be interested and might be reaching out to you. More broadly speaking, I think that what we see from the experience of international institutional partnerships is that it becomes increasingly important to understand that institutional priorities and institutional capacities are exactly very different. And finding the partners in Ukraine who would have similar priorities to what you're trying to achieve would be probably the most crucial. again, this is gonna, not necessarily gonna have to be on the institutional level, right? Because one of the benefits of the Ukrainian Educational Research Association or the University Alliances of numerous other nonprofit organizations that bring together scholars from across Ukraine is the fact that those institutions outside of formal universities are much more flexible. They provide much more opportunities for scholars to exercise their creativity, their agency, and as mediators, they might be more efficient in helping disseminate information and support individuals who might be interested in learning from your experience. I'll leave it at that, probably.
Johanna, Oksana, you, I have another question, but while you think about it, maybe that's another question that can be helpful in that regard, which comes from Hugo. Hugo, are you online, or should I read the question?
I am. Simply my camera is not working. I apologize for that. No, I was just, I was just listening previously, and I was wondering about the role of the diaspora. Not really thinking about the current moment, but about the, I don't know if we're going to call it the frozen conflict or the win of Ukraine. We don't know what's going to happen. But I'm pretty sure that with the current political kind of maneuvers between Ukraine and the European Union, at some point, some sort of integration or closer relationship is bound to happen. And this means that I imagine some kind of Marshall Plan for Ukraine will happen. And it will definitely contemplate the possibility to reform the higher education system in the country. So I was wondering, wouldn't that be a perfect opportunity for the diaspora to take a more active role? And not only, I'm not talking, when I talk about diaspora, I'm not talking only of people who left Ukraine that is already established, so on and so forth, but about people who are doing PhDs that probably by that time they're going to be graduated, and they might want to go back to Ukraine and to kind of change the country, to bring a new start to the country after this terrible war. So I wanted to know your feelings about that. Probably a naive but more positive kind of perspective on things. I would like to know your feelings about it. Many thanks. Just before going, as Anatoly mentioned at the very beginning, I'm the chairperson of the Consortium of Higher Education Researchers, and we have a conference every year. You are more than welcome to submit proposals, and we started this year. It's more focused on refugees, but not only. If you want to come to a conference and you cannot afford, at least we can waive the conference fee. It's a help. We're not a wealthy organization by any means, but we try to help at least that scholars, colleagues that come from countries which are undergoing wars or civil strifes to be able to still participate internationally in the conferences of higher education researchers. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Yeah, CHER, as we call it, is a very influential network in Europe, and provides a number of good insights in terms of how to deal with problems in higher education. There's a wide range of topics discussed at the annual conferences in very interesting places in Europe. So I guess Ukrainian scholars would definitely benefit from it. I would say in terms of the diaspora, because I might feel like I'm probably part of that, and the question that you just raised, and in terms of what Florian was asking before, I guess that type of bridge that needs to be built between different communities of research and policy development and intellectual groups that simply curious or want to engage with innovation. I think diaspora can be that bridge and scholars who learned in other systems and developed themselves in other systems can probably create that opportunity for both local innovators. I'm not sure we can persuade or connect survivalists or reproducers, as we said before, right? So it's kind of innovators who might look for new ideas, new organizational forms. If we develop a bridge and develop communities and travel more ourselves, get engaged with the problems on the ground, I think we can probably achieve more. But from my own experience, I know that's not an easy path, right? So we shouldn't really kind of describe this as kind of a major solution. I think that's a solution, but still those kind of problems that Florian was asking, what should you be aware of? That's constantly like the question that you would need to ask in a local place in terms of what exactly they need, where exactly their problems are in terms of human capital, maybe as Yevhen mentioned, or maybe institutional transformations, or even those kind of security concerns. How do you address those security concerns, right? When you need to send your students to bomb shelters, or make sure that they are able to continue their learning safely and continue to be engaged with international scholars somehow online when the internet is down or it doesn't exist anymore. So how does that really exist or bother the scholars at that particular local place? What are their concerns? And this is something to continue asking, to be constantly engaged, right? So it's called pretty much doing this kind of research every day, or action research, if you wish. So Liz, I can see your hand present. So comment from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what you've mentioned about the diaspora, because the role of diaspora has really been looming prominently in my studies. And I think that there are a couple of lessons that we can also learn from the previous experience of engaging with Ukrainian diaspora, because there are strong diasporic institutions, mostly, of course, when we talk about academia, we talk about North America. But we also know that particularly they have had a very significant role to play in reestablishing some of the areas of research in Ukraine after its independence from the Soviet Union, right? So we, in institutions like the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, for example, scholars from Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute like Pan Hrabovich have had particular role to play in establishing whole departments, right, when we're talking about humanities, in particular focused on Ukrainian literature, language studies, or history. And that has been a very interesting and a very important experience that Ukraine can draw on to learn how we could grow and multiply that kind of engagement of diaspora, how we can extend the number of spaces where diaspora scholars are welcome and where they can contribute. The challenge of that experience, though, I think has really been scaling and sustaining the change, because nowadays we can see that despite those resources that diaspora scholars and diaspora communities more broadly have invested in some of the reforms in post-independent Ukraine, they have had limited effect. So the question is really, how can we ensure that at this stage, right, when we have the full-scale war, that change that diaspora scholars are able to facilitate in Ukraine is broader in scope and sustained. But to also add, I think we should remember, and this is well known among the Ukrainian scholars, of course, but maybe less discussed more broadly, there is a very very different role that diaspora scholars are playing these days too, because the Ukrainian diaspora scholars, particularly in Europe and North America, are very actively engaged in challenging the Russocentrism of Western academia. And that has been a particularly important challenge to tackle. I feel that to an extent, Ukrainian state has tried to support researchers through the Ukrainian Institute in that regard, and through other institutions such as the Ukrainian Institute in London, for example, who also actively work on those issues. Because we have to be aware that, as Oksana has mentioned, right, there are a lot of misconceptions, both in lay communities, but in academic communities too, about Ukraine more broadly. And sustaining that support for Ukraine also takes up a lot of resources of diaspora scholars who are actively engaged in advocating for Ukraine and challenging very Russocentric narratives that have been inherent in some of the Western academic institutions due to their continued engagement with Moscow in particular.
Thank you. Johan?
Well, yes, I wanted to use this opportunity also to draw attention to our previous report, which we completed in early 2023 on higher education. Can you see the slides now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is interesting in this report is about 80 pages of text that you can read about Ukrainian universities and their situation, at the end of 2022. And also it has some very sad pictures like these that show some of the universities that suffered from the Russian shelling. This university wrote the report, a team of 3 people, 3 co-authors with my colleagues Ivan Shemelinets and Grigory Ry. And Ivan Shemelinets has now been appointed since January 2023 as the vice rector of this university on this picture, and he is doing his best to help find resources and opportunities to recover all this thing. Also, because we are talking a lot about international dimension of higher education, this slide shows that the Ukrainian universities were gaining momentum on attracting international students up until the war. And unfortunately, due to the war, the official data was that at the beginning of 2023, we have the number of international students divided by half. Unofficially, people say that we have basically, due to the war currently, lost most of the international students. They certainly do not continue staying in Ukraine, and they are refraining from studying at our they are not always continuing to study in our universities in a distance form. So one picture of the territory of Ukraine that that is currently occupied or was occupied over the warfare is. So it's a huge territory, really, and this is a link to the full report. I'll copy the link to the chat, and would like to thank for the opportunity to speak all the organizers.
Thank you very much, Johan. Please put your slides, if possible, or the link, as you said, into the chat room, into the chat, and then the participants will be able to get the report, as well as probably reach out to you if they have questions. Thanks for sharing that. And we're approaching the kind of the end of this webinar. I see several more questions from Uliana Pizametsky, who talks about a very important question of student government, student involvement, right? It's probably we would need to have another discussion on this as well, because students have been definitely playing a major role in the transformation of Ukraine's higher education in general, and local students as well as international students, at least in terms of pressure, in terms of expectations, in terms of how they were contributing to creating networks and solidarity in the country. But some of them are now abroad and get engaged in some other ways with their peers abroad. So that's a big topic on its own. So let's kind of talk about this in our next one of our next webinars. And I also see the message from Yam Bantorn talking about the webinar which will be taking place in Cambodia. So, and some Ukrainian students are involved in that. So you can see that it's not only Ukrainian students going to the West, it's also there is a good number of them studying in Cambodia and Japan, as far as I know, and Taiwan. So it's kind of there's been that type of solidarity evolving globally, not only within the region. So I want to, and I see also from Walker Trimble saying how university is compensated with technology, distance education, research. So there are so many of these kind of important, very important questions to continue discussing in the next little while. So I think that's kind of, they should be going into webinar 2.0, 3.0 or something of that kind, just for us to allow to learn a little bit more about the Ukrainian challenges, as well as strategies for improvement, for development. But in any case, I want to thank all of you for taking part in this conversation. And the webinar was conducted in collaboration with the Consortium of Higher Education Research, and was dedicated to memory and success, achievement of our two colleagues in education research and higher education research, Svitlana Shchudlo and Serhiy Kurbatov. And we definitely also remember many other professors and students who have been defending their country, and some of them unfortunately passed away or perished, killed during the war. So let's remember that this war is kind of some sacrifice that we should really treasure, and also remember that the job that we as intellectuals have is really just to have this sacrifice not wasted, and so that we can just kind of turn what we achieve from trying to create a kind of a more peaceful, more secure environment, even in these darkest times, right? At the expense of the people who stand bravely against the authoritarian regimes and against the authoritarianism in general. So I think that's something that we have to continue thinking about and continue to engage with, in terms of how what we learn about becomes really a good lesson for next generations, or something that we can teach in a better way, maybe, or develop in a better way. So let's continue to think about it. So thanks very much, everyone. And as I said, your contribution, your participation is very much appreciated. Let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.